of news this week. Everyone read it. Everyone was talking about it. Tim Cook.
Tim Cook.
Big Tim, man. Let him cook, man.
He's always cooking.
Let him cook, man. Look, I think the obvious question.
I think he's a legend, honestly.
Okay.
I did think Tim Cook is a legend. Even though, there's people who don't really like him. And they say, obviously, an example is this AI thing. Like, how did he let Apple fall behind? So people also think, like, Apple has not been innovative lately. So all they're doing is, like, focusing on marginal increases. And they're not really trying to be at the forefront of, like, cutting-edge technology, which people believe, like, that used to be Apple. You know, people say Steve Jobs was here. Steve Jobs was here, like...
Wouldn't happen in my day.
And I understand, but, like, you also have to look at the numbers. Like, it took Apple from where? I think 350 billion in evaluation to... I think last year they touched 4 trillion at some point. So, like, I mean, the numbers speak for themselves.
It's quite good.
Yeah, the numbers speak for themselves.
So I mean, look. Ultimately, we're saying, well, what's the legacy?
Yeah.
But what's the legacy? What kind of legacy does he leave behind?
I mean, I think Tim Cook was good for Apple when he came because I think he helped them to become like the staple, like the. Even though obviously there are certain things he tried which did not work out, like the Apple Card. I don't know if you saw stuff about the Apple Card. They were working on the Apple Card for quite a while, and they eventually had to bin it. There's been a couple of things that they've worked on, which shows the aspects of which explains why people think they've not been as cutting edge and innovative. There was a product they also cancelled some time that they got smoked for. This wireless charger. Like, it sounds like a very basic product. So they were supposed to release a wireless charger that could charge all 3 devices at once. So you just drop all 3 devices on the wireless charger and you can charge in any position. And Apple had to cancel that, which is crazy for a company like that. You think, why can you not figure out the engineering to do this? So while I do agree that regarding that, I think Apple has stalled. But I think regarding from the business point of view and from like getting Apple to be like a company that cannot fail anymore, I think he has done a good job at that.
Yeah, I mean, you said it there, going from 350 billion to 4 trillion. Now, how much can you really criticize as a lowly mortal, right? How much can you criticize? I think what I do think back to is, you remember there was that period of time when Mark was going on these podcasts and starting to talk quite loud. You know, it was kind of the turn of the Biden to Trump situation. And he went on one of these podcasts. I think it was a Joe Rogan or something, and he said something like, "Oh, you know, Apple hasn't really innovated anything in the last 10 years." So he started getting smoky, and he said, you know, they haven't really done anything in the last 10 years. Yeah,
I remember that one.
And it did. I hate to say it because it's such an iconic brand. Like, for us, anyone of our age, it is an iconic brand. Yes. Probably the most iconic brand globally in that period of time.
Yeah, agree.
Definitely on the consumer side, undoubtedly.
Agree.
We all got iPhones, we all had enough. Everyone's got one. I think the question, if you look specifically at the last 10 years of what has been the next innovative product strategy, is valid. I kind of look at it and go, what is possible? What outcomes can I possibly do now with Apple that I could not have done 10 years ago? And I can't really think of any good ones. And look, as you say, in terms of execution, has been absolutely phenomenal. Margin expansion has been absolutely phenomenal, even though sales growth has dipped from what we can see, or definitely the growth has dipped and flatlined a little bit.
Yeah, true.
So I think there's going to be some legitimate questions asked around execution. Absolutely amazing. Strategy and vision. Could we have done more? And I think the one, because I think legacy can be a bit of a, could be bit of an abstract word, right? What do we mean by legacy here? But I just think, what are you going to be remembered for? And I think it's going to be defined as we go decades and decades in the future.
Yeah.
So I think when we look now, we can easily talk about the era of all those generations of iPhones and just say, yeah, they printed cash. They printed cash, they
Literally.
smashed it.
That's literally what he did.
Yeah, they printed cash. It's a
Yeah.
cash machine. But I think the question is going to be where everyone else diverged, where Meta diverged, where Google diverged, where Amazon diverged, and they invested tens, by then it will be hundreds of billions, probably trillions of dollars in AI capex and compute. And Apple went on its standalone, unique position to say, no, we're not going to bother doing any of that.
Yeah.
How is that going to be looked upon in retrospect in 20 or 30 years? I think that's going to be interesting. I know you got a point of view. No, you got a point of view. Tell me, what do you
to
think?
be honest, I think regarding that, obviously, there's no real way to know how, like, what trajectory this is going to go. There is genuine risk in being passive and saying you don't want to invest this, because really, what are you using the cash for otherwise?
Another valid, legitimate question to ask.
Otherwise, what are you really using the cash for? Why would you risk missing out on this? I can't really see a good reason for that. Like, okay, your balance sheet looks amazing, but it seems like you're not taking a risk, but you are taking a big risk as well, saying you just want to keep your balance sheet looking like this and not going all in. But I think it's also a thing where I feel like they don't really believe they could be at the edge of that competition.
How can that be possible? How can it be that you can? How can these things coexist, right? How can you have created before that the most innovative wave in terms of really being the pioneer of mobile phones, of design, of brand, and being the absolute pinnacle in those fields, and I'd say design innovation as well, and at the same time not believe that you could be at the forefront of the next one when you actually look at it, and this was the reason people were laughing in the same way people were laughing at Google over Bard and all that and all that stuff. They looked at Apple and said, hold on, you'd already had Siri, like you could have at least given us something. Like you could have given us something. So what? And how do you look?
To be fair, they did try. So I don't think it's just that they didn't believe. They did try, and it flopped. It flopped really big.
Which ones are you talking about?
So Siri, they actually tried to. News came out. They tried to do their own internal like generative AI and like revamp Siri, obviously to make it more conversational. And they kept promising, even when they released the whole ads when the new phones came out, and they said Apple Intelligence. And they said it was going to come out, and then they just kept pushing it. They kept pushing it because they actually couldn't get it working. And I know some heads rolled, like some people had to move around. They really had to move.
Respectfully.
Yeah, so
someone had to go.
Some heads rolled because they're like, this is embarrassing. Because like, we're not even saying train a massive model. We're not even saying be Claude. Like, we're just saying get Siri to work. And they couldn't do it. So I think which is why I really see the point where you're saying what really is his legacy. If it seems like Apple's fangs have really been dulled and they're not able to really like strike and like say they want to go for this and go for it. It seems like all they know how to do now is built on what they already have and just keep going. Like, okay, they've got silicon. Well, I guess maybe silicon was the only, to be fair, maybe Apple silicon was the one thing that I'd say was innovation in a way. Because, they were initially, they had Intel and then they got silicon and like their performance really jumped. But aside that, it's just like building on top of everything else sequentially and not.
Yeah, because I think also one of the things people are definitely they're gonna posit is they're gonna say that legacy that we're talking about there of being the pioneer of mobile phone. That is gonna be a Steve Jobs legacy.
Yeah, true.
That's what people are gonna say. He's the one that take it from the clunky old little one Motorola and the clicky BlackBerry and to look, this is what good looks like as a mobile design and experience.
True.
And even now, it still feels funny that you've got better hardware for mobile phones across loads of providers at this point, but the actual experience and design, it still feels a stratosphere away with Apple versus the others. And so I think that's what he's going to be remembered for. That's what people are going to say. You changed the world in that way, and you had a monumental impact in that way. And I just look at it and just think, you know, you don't always have to compare to the predecessor. So you know, it's big shoes to fill, all that good stuff. Do you have to reach the level of Steve Jobs? Do you have to reach the level of Steve Jobs? Probably not. But I just think the unique identity, the question of what monumental global impact, not just in terms of generating cash, did you have, is going to be asked. And yeah, and we'll see what the answer looks like on this AI Cafe.
Yeah, it's a hard one. It's a hard one to say this was his up. To be fair, it's a hard one.
Another big piece of news. I think part 3 we're gonna have to start talking about. We're gonna have to start talking about SpaceX.
SpaceX. Interesting company. Very interesting company.
I mean, look. So, firstly, at this point, it feels like we're just saying enormous numbers for the sake of it. But again, I read this week it's somewhere from, depending on which source you want to look at, they're going to try and file to go public with the S1 at 1.5, 1.75, 2 trillion. That's the order of magnitude we're talking about as valuation. Yeah, so we're talking about another, gargantuan company at this point. And alongside those kind of leaked, unconfirmed, but looking relatively credible reports, it seems like they kind of just went and just bought Cursor. Talk to me about what you thought about that when you saw it, man. What was your reaction?
To be fair, I don't think they've not actually gone through the purchase yet. So I think they said they're going to invest 10 billion.
Well,
and then if things go the way they plan, I guess, they're valuing them at 60 billion. So they plan to potentially buy them at 60 billion. And I think that's very interesting because, I mean, it just makes me think, like, you've got XAI over there, and like Elon says all of this about his AI team, and it's just like Cursor is basically, obviously, it's grown to be more than that, but Cursor was essentially a VS Code clone, and like there was Windsurf there. Like so many people did that. Like, why could XAI not do that? Which I find very interesting, and I think is really not the best look, because even if you look at Grok, like even, I mean, as much as I mean, they've tried to compete and they've tried to build Grok, and the other time they even had the thing with NVIDIA and all of that. I don't think anyone really uses Grok out there.
Like, you say no one cares.
I don't think it's just on X, Twitter X, that people. And there was a time Elon was really pushing to be using Grok as to be making images and making videos of explicit images and all of that, because no one was really using it for.
Bro, I don't even want it. Bro, I don't even want it.
Well, the way it's in for, so like,
an embarrassment.
Yeah, I just find it interesting. Like, why would you need to go buy Cursor? Why not build it?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think I look at it in a few ways. You actually said something fascinating there in passing. You said people don't really use Grok, the LLM, unless it's inside Twitter.
At least to the best of my knowledge, and people around me.
But I don't listen. I don't really talk to people who are using it just day to day. Right? I'm not gonna lie. But that is interesting, right? Because what you do start to unravel there is a distribution strategy, because where you got Gemini and you got Claude as almost these standalone product wrappers, or even their own kind of start to get into products, arguably ecosystems.
Yeah.
It is actually, again, a diversion in strategy. Elon's kind of saying, yeah, cool, you guys kind of, go and try and again build new ecosystems that are going to be disparate and separate from each other again. I am going to embed Grok into stuff that people actually use.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to bother like trying to build this own ecosystem just for the sake of LLMs. I'm literally going to infuse my model into stuff that you do day to day already, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
So now Grok, as you just said, right, it's already there in X, whether you like it or not. Eventually you're gonna see it and you're gonna use it. I'd be interested to see what the token usage is like. I'd imagine it's.
I mean,
still
it's quite a
pretty
lot.
decent,
There's
yeah.
a lot of people do the tag Grok.
Yeah.
You see a news, you're like, Grok, is this true? Like,
Yeah.
that's most of what the usage you see on Twitter,
Yeah.
like
Mm.
true or false.
Okay.
But I think the problem with that is that a lot of companies are starting to realize that the margins aren't going to come from the everyday consumers. Like the margins are coming from enterprise, and which is why even OpenAI is trying to do like the pivot now, because we're initially focused on putting it in consumers' hands, talking about how many weekly users they were having, and they saw Anthropic zooming past them with in terms of revenue, and they realized like this needs to get into enterprise. This is where they're going to make the money. Consumers aren't going to pay what it's actually worth. And that's a problem I think Grok is having, which is probably why they've thought, you know what, we need to take development seriously, because that's where the enterprise is actually paying the money. And they realized no one is going to pay what this is really worth on Twitter. And they're trying to get Cursor now to see, okay. Which I think, obviously, I mean, is a mistake that OpenAI made as well, to be fair. So it's not like they're the only ones who didn't see it coming. I guess Anthropic was.
Yeah, they're eating. They're having it, man.
Yeah,
they're having it. I saw a chart that looked quite interesting. It was talking about it was looking at the curve of share of enterprise dollars effectively in the US for the big enterprise companies, and OpenAI actually had a relatively big advantage for about 18 months or so. And there's this quite interesting point, kind of about 7 or 8 months ago, where OpenAI starts to, descend and Anthropic overtakes, and then the curve actually accelerates for Anthropic, and now it looks like they've got somewhere from 30 to 50% of that enterprise share, which it's kind of, that in itself is just kind of almost scary at how quick the share can change and how quick the market's growing.
Yeah, no one would have seen that coming.
Another thing I do, at the same time, I do also kind of think for these share questions is, I think the whole concept of market share in general is overrated. Generally, because I kind of look at it and go, okay, people want to carve and create a finite boundary around what a market or segment even is, which again, I don't even think you can actually do in the first place. So there's that.
Yeah.
And then I also look at the growth curve. All this time when people were talking about our share of consumers, share of dollars, you're talking about a company that has gone from 0 to 900 million weekly users on one product in about 2 and a bit, arguably 3 years, right? That's the gradient that we're talking about in terms of a growth curve, in users.
Yeah.
Now the question in terms of conversion to revenue and cash, I get it. Of course, that those questions are valid and they're still going to come. But if you're talking about impact, are they really sitting there really kind of panicking around what percentage of consumers or companies use them versus a competitor? I don't know. I think there's a little bit of course, there's a little bit of ego on being the number one AI company. But are they really thinking about the percentage of dollars like that in a market that is growing exponentially? I don't know. And I'm not sure how. Well, on the consumer side, I'm certain that it's not that important. On the enterprise side, I'm curious to see if it is going to be that companies do trust their entire company's data on one model going forward. My real instinct is that there is going to be a level of sharing across models. I think when you look at the big hyperscalers, again, some of them have started to forge their own allegiances with different models. Yeah. If we really think this is going to have the enterprise adoption that we think it's going to have, I can't imagine that these big JP Morgan, these big banks, they're going to be splitting it across models. I can't. Also, it's a better negotiating position for one. So that's like a hard benefit and reason why they would. Data security, everything. I just can't see that we're going to get to a place where one of them has an astronomical share and the others are all eating scraps. Yeah. I just can't see it happening. It doesn't usually happen. This isn't going to be a monopoly market. It's going to be an oligopoly with a few big players. The only question is, are OpenAI going to run out of cash first? And then there might be someone else that takes their place. But I don't think we're going to get to a place where Anthropic has 90% share of these enterprise AI markets for any sustaining period of time.
Yeah, I agree. I think initially people were starting to think that was it, because everyone was saying Anthropic was like the best coding model, Claude is the best coding model, but it kind of comes in waves. Right now, people are starting to say, okay, GPT 5.5 is actually really good. And as a company, you don't want to be stuck somewhere and the other one is blowing past you. You're like, oh, I wish we had that. So I think companies are actually starting to integrate multiple models, and then it depends on developer. So developer sentiment is probably what determines who uses more, but they'll both or multiple models be available for people to use.
Bro,
So,
we even talked about it already. Think
Yeah.
about, I keep talking about Bard. The
Yeah.
way everyone was laughing at Google,
Yeah.
and Google said, yeah? Yeah? All right, cool. They went quiet and they came back 6 months later and boom.
It went to cook.
Gemini, exactly.
It went to
That's how
cook.
quickly it changes. And so
True.
I'm not,
True.
I'm certain that we're going to get to a place where there's a few big players that have a pretty commanding, decent share and even have a little bit of, power as a collective if they start to operate together, almost like a monopsony type market. I don't think we're going to end up in a place where Anthropic is
it's just way
outright
ahead. I agree, actually, now that I think about it. Because even I've heard a couple of developers working in senior companies. Okay, initially they were all using Claude, and people were using. It's funny how people are starting to use tokens more than their salary. And I think you saw this that came out in Meta the other time, saying someone used there was news that came out in Meta that they had like a leaderboard, like token leaderboard, and the highest leaderboard user had used, I think, about something billion tokens, I don't remember, but which basically costs millions of dollars. And people are literally spending their complete compensation in tokens.
Yeah. Well, Tom Bloomfield, the Monzo guy, I don't know if you saw it, he tweeted something like, oh, I'm really interested to see the point where companies' token spend exceeds their spend on headcount and salaries.
Gonna happen. 100%.
Yeah, I think what he was saying is like, if you go to West Coast SF or you go through any of those YC batches or anything like that, you kind of got there already.
Yeah,
if you ask
already
any of them already, like there's loads of companies that, and I don't think it's easy to just look at a startup or scale up and think, yeah, of course they're AI native, they're going to be doing that. I think where we get to that place in an enterprise kind of market, I don't think we're that far away from that either.
Yeah.
So, you know what? Actually, you just reminded me of one more before we move on. I had to bring it up. We talked a lot this time about the cost of compute, the amount of CapEx. Can the curve be sustaining for, a period of time that exceeds a few years? Talk to me about data centers in space. Talk to me about data centers in space. Is it fantasy or is it real?
Genuinely, I think obviously the way technology moves, we eventually find something interesting that makes something we thought wasn't possible before work. But as of today, right now, I don't think that's happening, because the one bottleneck we have down here, like, what's the reason you wouldn't build here? Because we don't have enough power. That's literally the only reason. There's no other reason to take that far away. We don't have enough power, or maybe like land acquisition is getting like harder because they're just, I guess it depends on the country. Some states it's harder to buy that amount of land, and like all the Lego, hullabaloo you have to go over. Space, no one owns it. You just shoot your thing up and like go there. But then you have to think about, okay, what are the constraints in space as well, and like which seems more feasible, like which makes more sense. Because when you go to space, you're starting to think of, one of the problems we have here, obviously, is cooling. And obviously, you can see everyone complaining about how every message you send to ChatGPT is using like a bucket of water. Like, you know how much of that you use to cook now? And like, none of that is over there. There's no water to cool anything. And you don't have the infrastructure that we have here that helps in cooling. Now, people are saying maybe they can create heat sinks. So those heat sinks basically means you have like very massive way for like to like dissipate heat. Because in space, there's no air. There's no way to like blow like whatever you have. So they need ways to dissipate the heat. And like you have this massive heat sinks that are just floating. And the idea is you would just like push the heat out. But like, how efficiently can you do that? Because cooling is very important for the data center. And then aside that, like maintenance, like how you've got something that breaks. These things break all the time. You got something that breaks. You got something you need to repair. You're gonna fly someone. You're gonna send a quick astronaut to go fix something. It might become easier when we have like, I mean, as the agentic era gets by, maybe you have robots stationed in space already, maybe in the future, and you just don't want it to robots to go do something that they know what to do. Maybe we're gonna get there, but I think right now it's just CEOs. CEOs just say whatever they want to say.
Dream.
They sell these dream investors whatever dream they want to sell. And you also look like, okay, there's SpaceX, like you can see why there is incentives to say things like this, because you have investment in SpaceX, you want people to think SpaceX is going to be the frontier of taking everybody's things to space.
Before I even give my point of view, one thing I would say is, one thing I look at often is, what is the multiple that a SpaceX or a Tesla or whatever is trading at versus revenues versus, the other big fast growing companies. One thing you have to say about Elon in terms of his ability to articulate a vision is really in a different dimension, because always, and I was looking at it yesterday or, over the last couple of weeks, and Tesla was trading at something like 130 to 180 forwards earnings, price to earnings ratio, right? And you look at the others and they're maybe somewhere from 30 to 40. So even that kind of tells you his ability to articulate that he is selling you a proposition on a discount from the future versus what the price of it is today. It is an ability and it's a craft that I think they need to start taking lessons from him, because he's a different level. He's a different level.
Yeah.
As for the data centers in space, the one thing I would say is, you mentioned a couple of interesting things there when you started talking about, cooling versus power. When I was looking at it, I think the interesting thing that I found is, you've got this there are certain orbits where you've got this weird balance of being out there where you're at really, really cold.
Yeah.
Like not livable as a human cold. Yeah. Super, super, super cold. So you kind of remove the pressure and intensity of the cooling requirement. But then you also have this kind of proximity to the sun. So you have this almost infinite light energy as well, and source of light and heat energy as well. So I think some kind of astrophysicists or someone who actually is in that space looked at it and really kind of looked at it and sat down and thought, if you can find the right position where you can optimize for natural cooling, so you take away the need to have these big cooling, liquid cooling vents or whatever that are out there, and actually get yourself in a position where it's just orbited in a place that is naturally cold, and then also find a way to be close enough to the emission of that heat and light energy from the sun. Actually, would it not be drastically cheaper to run them out there versus on Earth? I think it's a utopia, right? It's a utopia, but the principles of the physics are interesting.
Yeah.
I think the things you touched on in terms of the launch costs and the operational costs, the maintenance costs, are definitely interesting and don't really hold up in today's laws of, not necessarily the laws of physics, but laws of operations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you make a good point there, because I know, like, basically the way heat spreads in space is kind of different from here, because you don't have air. So if you've got like an object in space and one is facing in the direction, if this is facing the sun and this is facing the opposite direction, this can get extremely hot and this can be cold as ice. That's literally how space works, because you've got the radiation from the sun directly hitting this, and there's nothing on this end, and this is just very cold. That's how quickly you can go from very hot to very cold. And there's really no atmosphere as well. So, I mean, I guess it would have to be like, they have to figure a way to make sure this end is always facing the sun, where you've got the power hitting you. The other end is where you've got all your servers and everything, and it needs to always not face the sun. But then you also need to figure out how to, because this is generating heat as well, you need to find a way to push out the heat. And I'm guessing eventually we'll get there. But I just don't think it's
Bro,
that.
I'm hearing 2029, 2030. I'm here. Listen, it's already 2026, so I'm hearing me 3 or 4 years out, man. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think they're good at selling dreams, but let's see. But let's see. Let's see.
Okay, man. All right. And look, I think we wanted to also do something a little bit different as well. I think thinking about some sort of part 4. I think we're co-founders. We work together, taking us through a little bit of a gear shift. I think one of the questions that we had gotten coming into this that people wanted to kind of cover is, I mean, it's actually not a bad segue, right? I mean, what's been the golden thread for what we talked about so far? It's been a lot of W's. It's been a lot of W's.
Wins.
Yeah, it's been win after win. We went from, Jensen to 5 trillion, to Apple to 4 trillion, to SpaceX to 1.5 to 2 trillion. It's people who, however you want to slice it, ultimately are winners. And respect to Tim Cook for being one of the league of extraordinary gentlemen as well. I think one thing that I wanted to